Today we'll be reading Unit 2, Evolution, Lesson 3, Speciation and Extinction, pages 114 to 124. There are over 360,000 documented species of beetles, making them the most species-rich group of organisms on Earth. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain causes of speciation and extinction. So can you explain it? Why did the number of mammal species on Earth suddenly explode over a relatively short period of time? The diagram is a visual representation of how scientists think groups of mammals evolved over time. It is based on evidence from the fossil record, physical similarities, and genetic data. Question 1. Compare the number of mammal groups that existed 200 million years ago to the number that existed today. What do you think could have caused this change? There's a chart. So if you go to 200 million years ago, mammal groups, we just have one group in the Jurassic period 200 million years ago, and then we have 13 different groups present today. Scientists think that, the reason this is because mammals started to evolve, and just very rapidly, and so evolution caused that one species to then turn into 13 species. Or 13 groups. They're not species. They're not talking about species. They're talking about groups of mammals. And there's 13 groups today versus the one group that we started with 200 million years ago. Turn the page. Exploration 1, explaining speciation. The Ming Dynasty completed construction on the Great Wall of China nearly 600 years ago. Today, populations of wind-pollinated plants that grow on different sides of the wall share more genes than populations of insect-pollinated plants that grow on different sides of the wall. The Great Wall of China is a barrier between plant populations. So question 2, describe how you think the Great Wall affects the reproduction of plant species pollinated by insects compared with plant species pollinated by wind. So here's the Great Wall of China. So basically, the wind-pollinated plants are going to have more genes in common because the wind can go over the wall easier. The wall doesn't really affect the wind, so wind can carry the pollen back and forth across the wall. So then the plants can fertilize each other on each side. So like you might have plants on this side that with the wind is able to carry the pollen over the wall and fertilize plants on this side. So their genes are going to be more similar. Whereas like insect plants, pollinated plants are going to have fewer genes because the insects can't have a harder time getting over that barrier. So the wall prevents the insects from getting from side to side. So you're going to see more plants on this side they might have the same types of insects on both sides, but the insects on this side have a hard time getting up the wall and crawling over to this side. So these plants are just going to produce with each other, and these plants are going to produce with each other. Species and speciation. A species is a group of individuals that can reproduce successfully in nature. This is a useful definition, but an imperfect one. For example, it is difficult to apply to organisms that reproduce asexually. Even so, the species concept is very useful as a scientific model. It is a testable idea that scientists can use to explain natural events. Scientists apply the species concept to study how new species form. Speciation occurs when two or more populations no longer successfully reproduce. Speciation requires a barrier to reproduction, which stops the flow of genes between populations. So the iwi, a Hawaiian honeycreeper, lives at high elevations on the island of Hawaii, Maui, and Kauai. The palila, another species of Hawaiian honeycreeper, lives only on the west side of the Mauna Kea, a Hawaii volcano. So question 3, the speciation process can begin if different populations start to specialize in different food resources or habitats. So compare the beaks of the two honeycreepers shown in the photos. Which bird do you think eats seeds? Which bird do you think eats nectar? So you can see here's one species that lives high up in the trees. Here's that species that lives on one side of the volcano. This one has a short, big beak. This one has a long, thin beak. So the red bird with a long, thin beak is more likely to eat nectar because it can get inside the flowers, whereas the short beak is going to be better and thicker beak is going to be better for like crunching seeds and breaking seeds apart. So the bottom bird is going to eat seeds. Causes of speciation. For speciation to occur, populations must be reproductively isolated, which means that they are unable to reproduce with each other. Geographic barriers such as the formation of mountains or a river are one cause of reproductive isolation. Isolation between two populations may also occur if individuals begin to specialize in different food sources or habitats, or develop different behaviors related to mating. The lemurs of Madagascar are an example of speciation. There are several hypotheses about how the ancestor species of the lemurs arrived on the island. For example, the ancestor species may have floated to Madagascar from Africa or traveled on a now extinct land bridge. Speciation of this ancestor resulted in more than 50 lemur species now living on the island. So, case study, speciation of lemurs. This map shows elevation and rivers in Madagascar, an island off the southeast coast of Africa. Winds bring rain clouds to the island's eastern coast, but they lose all their moisture crossing the central mountains. This pattern creates different climate zones. So there's three types of lemurs they give us. The common brown lemur, which lives mostly in the dry forest of the northwestern Madagascar. They eat mostly fruits, young leaves, and flowers. Then you have the red-bellied lemurs, which live in the moist lowland forest of eastern Madagascar. They eat flowers, leaves, and fruits of over 67 plant species. And then you have the ring-tailed lemurs, which if you think of a lemur, most people think of a ring-tailed with a black and white tail. They eat whatever they can find in the sparse vegetation of South Madagascar, including fruit, leaves, flowers, bark, sap, and sometimes insects. So you have the brown one, the common brown lemur, which lives here. You have the red lemur, which lives here, and you have the ring-tailed, which lives here. So based on where they live, depends on how much rain they get. So this side gets more rain than this side. So this is going to be warmer climates than this side. So that's going to determine what kind of plants grow there. So question 4, lemur populations in Madagascar may have become reproductively isolated by different mating patterns or geographic barriers, and its geographic barriers. The mountains and the rivers in the area are what separates these species from each other. Madagascar has several different climate zones, so lemur populations may also become isolated because of similarities or differences in habitat use, and it would be differences in habitat use. Obviously, the ones that live in wetter climates are going to eat different food than the lemurs that live in drier climates, because less things are going to grow in a drier climate. Turn the page. We are skipping pages 118 and 119 because they're a lab. So turn the page again. Question 20, analyzing soapberry bug evolution. Soapberry bugs occupy the tropical and temperate habitats of many continents where soapberry plants thrive. Soapberry bugs feed on the seeds contained inside the fruits of soapberry plants. They use a beak-like structure to pierce the fruit and get to the seed. Then they use their beak to pierce the seed, inject digestive juices into the seed, and suck up the digested seed matter. The red-shouldered bug is a type of soapberry bug found in southern Florida. It feeds on a native soapberry plant, the balloon vine, which has large, round fruits. In 1950, a new species of soapberry plant, the golden rain tree, was introduced to Florida. This plant produces fruit that is flat and thin. Researchers observed changes in the beak length of the bug in response to the new plant over only a few decades. So this red-shouldered bug is one of the many species of soapberry bugs. Blue with little red spots. So 6, analyze a graph that shows the size, ranges, and beak length and populations of red shoulder bugs that feed on balloon vine fruit compared with populations that feed on golden rain tree fruit. Write an explanation that describes the effect of the introduced tree on the evolution of the bug, and use evidence from the text to support your explanation. So you have in red, this is the new tree, this is the old tree, and it shows you that its beak length by how long the bar is. So basically, the golden rain tree fruit, the bugs that feed on the golden rain tree fruit have have shorter beak length. So you should observe that the bugs that feed on the balloon vine fruit have longer beak lengths compared to those that feed on the golden rain tree fruit. So this means that the beak length is dependent on the shape of the fruit and where the seeds are at in the fruit. So then 7, is it possible to predict with certainty if these two populations will become two species in the future? Why or why not? Speciation could occur if the two populations end up becoming isolated from each other, but right now, due to the food and habitat partitioning, however, right now you can't determine that because they do live together and you don't know if there's going to be an event that's going to cause them to be separated or not. Because just because they're eating different food sources doesn't necessarily mean they're going to separate from each other. So you can't say with it's likely that they will, but you can't say 100% for certain because you don't know all the factors going forward into the future. Like you don't know if there's going to be a disease that comes through and wipes out one type of tree, and so then you're only going to have one type of tree, and so then all the bugs will just evolve for that tree. So those are things you can't predict, so you can't say for certain that they're going to separate into two separate species. Exploration 2, explaining extinction. 250 million years ago, volcanic eruptions and other global changes caused the death of nearly 70% of all land species and 95% of all marine species on Earth. Though alarming, the Great Dying left openings in the environment that allowed surviving populations to move into new habitats. Devastation of seedless plant forests was followed by the rise of seed plants. The loss of many animals left openings for surviving reptiles, leading to the age of dinosaurs. So extinction rates through time. Extinction is the death of an entire species. This image shows the graph. This image above the graph represents species that went extinct during the peak extinction events in Earth's history. So we have 5 peak extinction events. We've talked about them prior, and you can just see them in this chart. So like you have one here, and you have one here, you have one here, and here, and here. So these are the largest mass extinctions events, this one being the largest out of all of them. So question 8, describe the pattern shown in the graph. So you can see that there's other peaks on here. Like you can see that there's extinctions going on all the time of species, and then every now and then you get like a big mass extinction where a bunch of species go extinct, and then you have a bunch of little extinctions and then another mass extinction. So extinction. 99% of species that have ever lived are now extinct. Extinction occurs when there are no members of a species left on Earth. Background extinctions happen at a fairly constant rate as species fail to adapt or compete in their environments while others succeed. At certain points in history, however, large changes to Earth's environment have caused mass extinction, in which more than 50% of existing species went extinct within a few million years. Causes of mass extinctions include asteroid collisions, rapid changes to sea levels, or geological events such as earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. The Panamanian golden frog is bred in captivity by conservationists, but may be extinct in its natural habitat. The frog was last seen in the wild in 2009. So background extinctions are just extinctions that happen naturally in the background, like they're always occurring. You always have species that are either on the brink of dying out or dying out. It's kind of normal as Earth changes naturally. But mass extinctions are those things that are caused by like an event, and then all of a sudden like half of Earth's population, like species, just die out because of that. And it doesn't have to be one event. It can be more than one event. It's just they have to be within a million years, so much time of each other. Turn the page. Page 122, question 9. Read the information about each endangered species which are at risk for extinction. Then use the factors listed in the word bank to describe the extinction threat for each species. So we have climate change, habitat loss, competition, pollution, and predation. So red panda are in danger of extinction due to spread of agricultural activities, including deforestation. The pandas live only in the Himalayan mountains of Nepal and China. So for the pandas, it would be habitat loss, and would just be habitat loss because they're losing their habitats due to farming. Then you have the white bark pine, an average. Here, I can show you the red panda. Here's the white bark pine, which is kind of hard to see. And as average temperatures rise, tree-boring beetles can spread to higher elevations and infest more and more white bark pines. So the extinction threat is climate change because the temperatures are rising, so the beetles are moving higher up in elevation where these trees live. Next up is the monarch butterfly. Migrating monarch populations are declining due to pesticide use. The pesticides used by farmers to protect their crops are killing milkweed plants where monarchs lay eggs. So this would have to do with pollution because we're polluting the air, and so then the butterflies can't migrate. Mariana fruit bat. Guam's Mariana fruit bat is facing extinction due to brown tree snakes. Brown tree snakes are not native to Guam. They frequently eat small mammals such as bat. So this is an example of predation because you introduced a non-native species, an exotic species, which is now hunting the bats to extinction. And then the red squirrel. We talked about this in the last book. So gray squirrels are not native to Great Britain. They have been introduced there, driving native red squirrels away. The gray squirrels are better foragers than the red squirrels, so the extinction factor would be competition because the gray squirrels are outcompeting the red squirrels for resources. Human activity and extinction. Human activity is a relatively new cause of extinctions. While unintended, the ways we interact with the environment to live, eat, produce energy, and build economies affects the health of ecosystems. Clearing of land for farms, cities, and roads causes loss of habitats. Overuse of plants and animals for food, medicine, shelter, and sports threaten many species. So hunting. When the rate of use is faster than the rate of reproduction, a species may become extinct. Human activity is also linked to pollution, climate change, and the spread of invasive species. If human-induced environmental changes are extreme or rapid, populations may not have time to adapt and survive. The current rate of extinction is more than 100 times the expected background rate. Scientists predict the loss of large numbers of species over the next century. Conservation actions are increasing in an effort to keep pace. So then they analyze MVP of Siberian tigers. To determine if a species is facing possible extinction and to plan conservation efforts, scientists calculate a minimum viable population, or MVP. The MVP is the smallest number of individuals that are needed for populations to survive for more than 40 generations, given current environmental conditions. The Russian Siberian tiger population dropped to only 40 individuals in the 1940s. The Russian government passed protection laws, and now the population remains steady at about 540 individuals. Conservationists estimate that 5,000 tigers are needed to meet the MVP. Over the course of one generation, which averages 12 and a half years in tigers, 170 tigers will be lost to poaching, road deaths, and natural causes in Russia's Siberian tiger population. So how many tigers die each year? Well, you would take 170 deaths divided by 12 and a half years, and that's about 14 tigers per year. So how many tiger cubs must be born each year for the population to remain the same? Well, deaths have to equal births, so 14 births. This is question 12. Assuming the death rate remains constant, how many cubs must be born each year to reach the MVP of 5,000 tigers in 2 generations, or 25 years? Well, if you have 170 deaths divided by 12 and a half years times 2, that's 340 deaths, divided by 25 years. So basically, they get 540 tigers, 340 deaths, which equals 200 remaining tigers. That's what's going to happen. In the next 25 years, they're going to have 200 remaining tigers based on numbers. So to reach an MVP of 5,000, 4,800 more tigers are going to need to be born over the next 25 years, which if you divide by 25 years, it's 192 cubs every year. Turn the page. So then we're skipping question 13. Identify solutions for wildlife corridor. The Canadian lynx is a threatened species. Logging, oil drilling, land development, and winter recreation break up the lynx habitat. Fires, including controlled burns, reduce the habitat of snowshoe hares, a common food source for the lynx. For lynx to rebound and succeed, they need a large continuous range. Conservationists look for solutions that give the lynx free range and good hunting grounds from Canada into the United States. Solutions must also meet human needs for industry, transportation, agriculture, and recreation. The map shows protected areas inside the wildlife corridor area needed for a continuous lynx range. So what are the criteria and constraints associated with design solutions for lynx habitat fragmentation and population decline? So here's the map. The green areas where the lynx are allowed are free range. You can't build anything there. So basically you need to have a lot of space. The criteria would be you need a lot of space for lynx to roam around in, and to reduce lynx deaths due to trapping and road accidents. The constraints or the problems with the solution is that the solutions or the difficulties you might face is that solutions must protect both the lynx and the humans, and they have to minimize the impact on existing human structures and activities. So match each number design solution with this location below where where it would be used to help maintain a wildlife corridor or the links. So you have housing communities and recreation areas within the corridor, land dedicated to farms and cattle ranches within the wildlife corridor, forested areas in Yellowstone National Park where lynx hunt for snowshoe hares, an interstate highway that crosses the corridor. And you have 1, land bridge or tunnel, 2, wildlife-friendly fencing, 3, no burn zones, 4, underdeveloped buffered areas. So the orders for numbers should be 4, 2, 3, 1. So the undeveloped buffered areas should be for the housing communities. Wildlife-friendly fencing should be with the cattle ranches. No burn zones should be for where the lynx hunt snowshoe hares, and then the land bridge or tunnel should be where the interstate highway crosses over the corridor, over the blocked off area. Your assignment is on Google Classroom. It's a lab about salamanders. You just read the sheet, answer the questions, and then tomorrow I will give you your test. It's all the vocab. You can use your study guide, your vocabulary on your study guide. You just match the term and the definition together and make so the terms are all listed at the top. You match the term to its definition by writing the letter in the space next to the right of the definition. There should be 2 columns.